now.
Hello, everyone. Otto Excelsior here. We're cruising in our special craft at 23,000 feet. I have my co-pilot and electronics warfare officer, Roger Hansen, here. And we are about to set our course and switch on the automatic pilot. Looks like we've got a fairly smooth cruise. You never know, though. There might be some turbulence. How have you been doing, Roger? What's going on?
I've been doing fine. I got the show going. It's streaming on Rumble, YouTube, Kick, and Twitch, and
Hi.
we're good to go.
Excellent. Well, if anyone is watching us on any of these fine platforms, please like us, leave a comment. We really appreciate those. And we'll even answer comments. And in fact, if you'd like us to talk about any specific subject, please feel free to offer suggestions in the comments. We will look at every single one and consider every suggestion given. Just nothing obscene or illegal in in the United States or its territories, please. So tonight I was thinking we need to be a little more focused, and automatic pilot is supposed to be a little bit about Buddhism. And when I was first asked to talk about Buddhism, my first thought was, well, my ignorance of Buddhism is vast. So nothing I say is to be taken as definitive. I am myself simply a student, not a teacher, but perhaps a teaching assistant. I always say the Buddha is the teacher, the Dhamma is the teacher. The instructions he left behind 2,600 years ago to guide us. So what is this Buddhism thing that we're always talking about? And that is a monstrously large question to answer. The Buddha, as many of us probably know, was a nobleman who was born in what would probably be today northern India in the Himalayan mountains, where he came of a very princely family, was very wealthy, had everything you could possibly want, hot and cold running dancing girls. Every sensual pleasure was catered to, up to the level of their technology and ability at the time. He found himself dissatisfied with this and decided instead to pursue the course of asceticism, yoga, meditation, and especially what they call austerities. That is to say, basically torturing the body. You've probably seen yogis and fakers doing things like, fasting for days or sitting under the hot sun. Sometimes they pierce themselves. There's the famous bed of nails, although that's more of a faker than a yogi thing. And he found that this didn't work either. So eventually he found a middle path. And this path is the one that allowed him to see past all of the, well, he used the term samsara, which means wandering on, all of the useless idiocies and lies and wastes of time that we spend our time on. And this comes down to what Buddhism really is. And all I can say is what Buddhism is for me. For me, Buddhism is seeing past this illusion. We spend most of our time living in an illusion. We spend most of our time taking on an identity in an imaginary world that we create in our own mind. We see something and we don't see what it is. We see hundreds and thousands of things that it represents to us. And we create an amazing drama within ourselves. And this causes us immense suffering. And when the Buddha was asked what he taught, he said, I teach two things, only two things: suffering and the release from suffering, how the cessation of suffering, how to stop suffering. And that's what he saw as the important question. Not whether you deserved to have your suffering ended, not whether you should have this, whether you were worthy of it or not, but rather how you can just stop suffering. Not pain. Pain is inevitable. You're going to step on a nail and it's going to hurt. There's nothing you can do about that. But what you can do is something about the suffering that you can inflict on yourself, cursing yourself for being so stupid as to have left that nail there. Even after the nail wound is healed, still kicking yourself mentally over how you could have left a nail there. And of course, you can extrapolate this to just about anything else. So in order to do this, we have to basically get control over our minds. We have to learn to think the things we want to think and how not to think the things we don't want to think. This is an immense task. This is an immense task. But it's really the only task, because if you spend all your time trying to change things outside of yourself, you will never find any satisfaction. You know, our wants, our needs, our wishes are infinite. And the universe that we have access to is ultimately finite. If nothing else in time, 70 years is the prescribed course. And many, many people don't even make it that far. Many of them don't even make it out of the womb. And even if you live beyond that, well, another 20, 30, 40 years, even so, it comes to an end. So looking outside of ourselves for satisfaction and happiness is ultimately not going to work. In fact, anytime we seek satisfaction, pleasure, or happiness in something that's impermanent, ultimately it's going to be unsatisfactory. Even a harmless pleasure, so-called, will still bring regret that we don't have the pleasure anymore. And we may very well regret the things we had to do to gain the pleasure. And where is it now? You know, when I was quitting drinking, I would look at 20 or 30 empty booze bottles and think each one of those is a $20 bill. Where is it now? Where is it now? So these pleasures are very ephemeral, and yet we continue to pursue them. And this is in no small part because we take on an identity, which again has nothing to do with the world as we're actually experiencing it. You know, we watch that beer commercial. We want to be like that guy in the beer commercial. You consume something and you take on its power by taking on the identity of the person that takes it on. So the Buddha saw that our problems come from our own minds. And I think he also saw that one of the most difficult things to do is to take control of that mind. The first thing you have to do is realize your position in life and what's actually happening to you. And he took on the problem of suffering as being the central problem that we can deal with. Now, there's lots of other problems you can deal with. And Buddhism doesn't say you have to concentrate on suffering. You have to take this path. You have to do this. No. It's simply if you want to end suffering. That's all it's for. If you don't want to, that's fine. There's lots of other paths. We're all on paths, actually. Very often we're not aware that we're on them, and those are some of the most dangerous paths to take. And most of them don't go to any place particularly nice, as many of us know from experience. And the way there isn't that great either. But if you want suffering to cease, you have to understand what suffering is. And the Buddha said basically that this is going to get me in trouble because I'm not a super expert on this and I don't know all the terminology. But this is my limited understanding, is that we crave things. And because we crave things, we cling to them. By clinging to them, that is the suffering. Our clinging to the things we crave. So we have to stop clinging to things. And usually what we're clinging to are things in our imagination. We cling to these mental constructs, these becomings, these identities that we take on. If we can stop doing that, the suffering that this causes will cease. But we cling because of the cravings we have, and we crave things because we are ignorant of their true nature. We're ignorant of the fact, literally, we ignore the fact that getting this item, this bottle, is only going to last the night, and then it's going to be gone. And that is going to be a very unsatisfactory pleasure at the end of the day, even though it might bring a few minutes of joy and then several hours of delirium after that, and then a horrible feeling of regret the next day. So this is the epitome of a transitory pleasure, of something that's purely ephemeral. So the key is to understand what we're doing, look clearly, see who we are, where we are, and what we're up to. And a big part of that is realizing that there are so many of these identities, and realizing that we have to be in charge of our minds. The mind is like a committee. It's like a mob, like mobocracy. like the Athenian democracy of hundreds and hundreds of people shouting and trying to get the chair and trying to take over. And they usually have only limited, there's the self that just says, I want that bottle. Got to have that bottle. Ignores all the other selves. If you let that self in the driver's seat, you're doomed. If you let the self in the driver's seat says, I'm really depressed, I'm really angry, all these defilements, anger, greed, they can take over. So the key is that you have to be the one in charge, not your feelings of anger, not your feelings of desire, not your feelings of anything, not any of these other limited selves. Some of them are very young selves that are very, very old. They go back to your childhood. You can have a 5-year-old self suddenly in charge. I want that. I'm going to get it. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. That's one of ourselves. We don't want that self in charge. When we look closely, we see that these are, again, identities we take on in an imaginary world. They have nothing to do with what's really happening. They have nothing to do with really the situation that we're in. But if we can take over, then we can quiet the child. Shut up, you brat. No, we can do it with understanding. And we can see more clearly what we want to do. And what we want to do is what's best for our long-term happiness. And that means that we have to forego things that might bring us some pleasure in the short term, but in the long term will not. Now, this sounds very simple. And I was told when this was first translated into English, they're like, this can't be the secret teachings of the Buddha. This is so simple. Yeah, well, try it. Try doing it. A lot of Buddhism is very, very simple, but it's very, very difficult. When I was first looking at Buddhism, like most Americans, I came across the kind of Mahayana neo-Buddhism of the Beats, Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac, and all these Buddhists that are like, drinking wine and taking drugs and having promiscuous sex. And I'm like, that sounds like a good religion for me. I was a teenager, very libidinous back then. And, you start looking into it and you have the Mahayana, especially the Tibetan Buddhism. They've got the Vajrayana schools there, and they've got wrathful deities and, wine cups made from human skulls and, and wine in the wine cups and yab yum. Oh my goodness, you can look that one up. But this is all very flashy and it catches your attention. But when you start actually looking at the Theravada, the original teachings, and reading the what the Buddha actually said, or at least the closest that we have to what he said, it's actually really very simple. You don't need wrathful deities. You don't need cosmic space Buddhas. You don't need interventions by bodhisattvas. You need a human mind and a human body. And you need to have the right attitude, the correct attitude to what you want to do with that mind and that body. And most of us don't want to do anything except get to the next pleasure, which is fine, but it's pretty aimless. And it does nothing to address all of the suffering. The way we address our suffering is usually to look for more pleasure. The pleasure brings us suffering, so we look for more pleasure. Pleasure brings us suffering, we look for more pleasure. This is not a great way to have a life. So we're trying to skip a step here in many ways. This is very confused, I know, and I'm jumping all over the place here with it. But I'm just trying to give a general idea of what Buddhism is trying to do, which is ultimately, the way I see it, is it's teaching you how to control your own mind, so that your mind isn't controlled by your defilements, by all these different selves you have in you that are really incomplete personalities, but which can take you over. And this training is very, very helpful. And here in the West, we've had so many kind of bastardized versions of it. One of the worst is the idea of being in the here and now, which is very important. There is no time other than right now. All of the memories you have of the past happen right now. All of your hopes for the future happen right now. And if you stare into the moment now, there's really usually very little to disturb us. And you're thinking about what a horrible person you are because you did this, that, or the other thing. If you bring yourself back now, you realize I'm not doing those things. That's just a memory. I don't have to invest any emotions in that. You don't at all. That's suffering that you can just let drop away when you can be here in the moment, in the now. But we're not here to be in the moment just to groove with it, man. They started teaching this sort of meditation to people in corporate workforces because corporate thought, well, if they're all here in the now and everything's okay because it's all happening right now, and they won't care if they don't get a Christmas bonus. They won't care if we reduce their pay. That's not what that's for. It's not to make you just happy with whatever's happening. That just leads to a low-grade depression, is all that does. No, we're here in the now because that's where we have power. That's where we have power over all these other little selves that want to remind you of something that happened a year ago or 10 years ago so that they can be in charge and you can be miserable again. You can be mad at someone again. And, anger is an interesting thing because we are angry very often before we find a cause for it. We can feel like we want to be angry. And then we'll turn on the news. All right, let's go to the Gateway Pundit. I'm going to find something to get angry about. You don't care what it is. It's like, now I found something out to be angry. I can really be angry at this idiot who I don't know, who contradicts me on a subject that I was completely unaware of 5 minutes ago. And suddenly this gives me a chance to be good and angry. But it's hard to do that when you're here. But when you're here now and can see these things clearly, that's, as I said, that's when you have power. That's when you can actually do things. You can make decisions. You can accomplish things. So being here now isn't meant to just detach you from everything. That just leads to, I know someone that did this exercise without other training, and they began to feel like what in psychiatry they call dissociation. They felt like they were a robot, that they could do anything. And this is a sort of thing that can lead people to commit all sorts of acts. These initiations, these techniques simply reflect very often what happens to people otherwise. All initiation ceremonies recreate something that happened to someone in life. Usually someone goes through an extreme physical and mental situation, something that tests them to their extremes. They're usually in pain, very often starving, very often hypothermed, and they come out of it and their whole mind is changed. Happened to Basil Rathbone, the guy that played Sherlock Holmes, among many other parts in the movies. In World War I, he was almost killed in the course of the war, and he was saying about how he was lying in the middle of a shell hole. He realized nothing mattered. Well, everything is what it is. And after that, he just went through the whole war with try to shoot me, go on. Lost all sense of self when it came to that. So you can come out of a weird situation and just have this different perspective, but it can also be very dangerous. I've often said, one of my favorite sayings is that the illuminated mind is like an arrow flying straight to hell. What do we mean by this? We mean that very often, if we have a lopsided practice, or if you attain certain mental states, if you are in a state where you feel that you're beyond good and evil, well, you might just decide to start doing evil. Because why not? This is like the robot thing. This is the dissociation that certain psychiatric drugs create. This is why kids on Ritalin and SSRIs are often very likely to turn violent. Because they have no idea what to do. They're not prepared for the state. They don't realize that the state can be a step. And they don't have any grounding in virtue, in generosity, and compassion, in the practice of the precepts, in seeing that when you do harm to others, you are harming yourself. I'm reminded of the play by Gene Wolfe. I've talked about this before, Roger, about the scene where the one woman is slapping another, and she slapped this woman, and the woman who slapped says, "I'm warning you, don't do that." And the first woman says, "Oh yeah," and slaps her again. And then the woman who was slapped say, "If you do that again, you will be terribly punished." And the first woman says, "What will happen?" And the one who was slapped says, "You will learn to like it, to like doing it, to warp yourself to such a point where you would enjoy inflicting pain on others." That's not a happy life. That's suffering. And that's what the Buddha wants to show us how to end. For that, we need a human body and a human mind, and be ready to do the work of getting control of our own mind. That begins with getting control over our own breath. Breath is key, and it's a very useful element to be used in this. The breath is unconscious and yet conscious. Breathe 24 hours a day, at least I hope you do. Even when you're asleep, you continue to breathe, and yet you can also consciously control the breath. So this is an interface where the conscious and the unconscious meet. And it's also the easiest physical manifestation of the mind state. Your mental state is reflected in your breathing. I learned that a long time ago. If I'm feeling anxious or upset, I look to my breathing while I'm holding my breath generally. Of course, I'm anxious and upset. I don't have enough oxygen in my blood. And that makes me more anxious and upset. And my mind will instantly find something to be anxious and upset about. We very often take our physical symptoms and find a mental hook to hang them on. And then the mental hook makes us even more upset. And as you see, it's a vicious circle. This can be interrupted. It's very difficult to interrupt the mental aspects of this, but you can interrupt the breath. If you breathe in a way that is slow and calming, you will become calmer. You can directly affect your own emotions. You do not have to be a toy to your defilements, to these members of the committee, the inner committee, who do not wish you any good, that only want to satisfy their hatreds or their lusts or their appetites, and will take the hindmost. You know, these are the people inside of you. It's I've heard the metaphor of the false friend, the guy that says, "Hey, let's go do this. Yeah, you throw that rock there. Yeah, that'll be fun." And this friend will lead you into some sort of an adventure, so-called. But then when the cops show up, friend isn't there. You're the one that has to go to jail. You're the one with the hangover. You're the one with the broken up friendships. You're the one that has to cope with that. And that friend of yours that was telling you, "Yeah, let's do this," he's gone. You want friends like that? I've had enough of those. I don't want any more. So, well, I've talked for almost a half an hour now, and I wanted to keep this brief. But I think what I'm going to try to do is talk a little bit about how Buddhism can help us in our day-to-day life, but also the importance of looking at it as a complete system. And I didn't go into any detail. This was not any sort of a systematic presentation, and perhaps I should work on one of those. There are plenty of those out there. And hopefully we'll find some people that are interested, some people that will want to ask questions or talk back about this. And hopefully we will get people, and I know many people who are much more well-versed in Buddhism than I am, to come on the show and talk about some of this in detail, and even correct any mistakes I may have made in detail. So, Roger, I've just been going on at quite the clip. Did you have any comments or questions or anything you'd like to talk about?
First of all, I want to say that you're doing great. Don't worry about trying to script anything out. Everything you said has been pretty amazing. I think it's good stuff. You do have viewers on Rumble. You got 4 viewers watching there.
Oh, hello! Excellent.
You've had 16 views altogether on YouTube, The Wonderful World of Weirdness, and 1 current viewer at the moment. And I don't always get the right amount of what the current viewers are on there. So we've got 2 of them on Kick. And Twitch, I never know how many people are actually watching on there. So, but with all that being said, nobody's made any comments yet. If anybody wants to make any comments, make them in the comment sections. I will read them to Otto so that you can.
Yeah, that'd be great. If anyone listening right now would like to comment, we'd love to hear a comment. If you want to comment later, we'll read them later. If you want to comment now, okay. Be happy to interact with anyone that would like to. That would be great. Interaction is so important. And I'd really like to hear from people that would want to listen to me. Yeah, I'd want to listen to you too, So, hey, contact us. That'd be very cool.
One thing that you were talking about that really stuck out to me is that secret, or that friend that you were talking about in your head that convinces you to do stuff.
Yeah.
Now, for me, I've had issues with a lot of people when I talk to them on the internet about that, because like when it comes to me, I had to sober up in 2003, and I had to learn about that person in the back of your head that lies to you. You know what I mean? It's in believing in the lie. Like, it's hard for people to comprehend the fact that you actually lied to yourself. You know, and
Yeah.
when you were saying that, that's really what stuck out to me. So I really appreciate that.
And that's it exactly. They lie.
You know?
Our mind will fool us. It's these guys inside, they're sneaky. They're very persistent. They lie, but you know what? They are not sneakier or more persistent than we are. And another thing is, they aren't us. We don't say this is me because I feel this. No, because because you can observe it, it's obviously not you. You wouldn't be able to see it if it was you, right? You wouldn't be able to look at it from the outside and say, no, I don't want to listen to this asshole. I know what's going to happen. That's you. And but yeah, the lying, the mind is really good at fooling itself. We come up with all these little rationalizations, and James Bond drinks, must be okay. Sherlock Holmes does cocaine, that's great. You always find an excuse.
Yep.
And you know what? Before I forget, I should have started the show with this, but I want to wish my admirable friend Roberta de Wessex, Bob Dub, a happy birthday. It's her birthday on the 21st. It's already the 21st where she is. But all of us here wish her a very happy birthday with many happy returns of the day. I'm sure Roger will join me in that.
Exactly. Happy birthday, Bob Dub.
Wish you were here. We're looking forward to when you can come back.
I would sing for her, but my voice isn't up to par.
You have to make a birthday song for her now on Udio.
Oh, we could do that.
Yeah, we'll make a birthday song for her.
We could do that. Do it.
Did a cool little birthday poem on mine.
Do one of JFK doing a Marilyn Monroe happy birthday.
I remember that.
In reverse.
I mean, I wasn't there, but I've seen the footage.
I'm pretty sure she'd get a kick out of that.
Yeah.
Seeing JFK do Marilyn Monroe's happy birthday. So, yeah. Happy birthday, Bob Dub.
Happy birthday, Bob. Happy birthday, Bob Dub. You're the best. So yeah, no, I'm hoping that getting back to the show, I'm hoping we can keep a good Buddhist focus. I'm hoping we can, like I say, interact with people, and I really want to talk about really all I can talk about is my personal experience. When I was thinking about doing this, it's like, what are you going to talk about? You're not this, you don't know this much. You don't speak Pali. I mean, I know guys that are Pali scholars. I know the limits of my knowledge. But then I said, well, I'm just going to stick to my precepts. And my precepts is that you don't tell falsehoods, is one of my precepts. And so I'll just be as honest as I can, honest about things I don't know, and talk about my own personal experience. And so I'm just going to try to be as accurate as I can be with what happened to me, but at the same time with a caveat that everyone is different, everybody has different experiences, and I am the first to admit the limitations of my knowledge about stuff. So this is really more my personal journey as I try to, find my way through life and suffering, because I've suffered enough. We've all suffered enough, Roger. None of us want to suffer. You don't want to suffer. Anyone that says, hey, there's a way to stop suffering, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to check this guy out.
Now, with suffering too, Like I've always gotten that mixed up when it comes to Buddhism. Now, I've heard some people say that suffering is necessary so that you could learn how to grow. And
Uh-huh.
then I've heard other people say that no, we want to avoid suffering. So, I mean, what exactly is your take on the whole suffering thing when it comes to Buddhism?
Well, first of all, I'd say when you say that suffering is necessary for growth and that suffering is to be avoided, they're both true. That's how we grow. If we suffer, we're trying to find a way out of suffering. Nobody wants to suffer. If they do want to suffer, well, then that's not really suffering. They're masochists, and it's a kind of pleasure for them. So that lets them out, right? So, yeah. So, and it's interesting when you say suffering is necessary. Um, we have to be careful how we use the language because I know what you mean, and you know what you mean. But it's very easy to read that as we need to have suffering so we can grow. But really, we have growth because we have faced and overcome suffering. Doesn't mean you should necessarily add suffering to the mix. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just suffering in and of itself isn't intrinsically good. But when we suffer, our first thought is how can we stop suffering? That's why we pursue these pleasures. That's why we try to do these things. We want to get out of the suffering. And not because nobody wants to suffer. But the trouble is that usually what we do to end suffering just will bring more suffering, down the road. And you can see that in long term and in short term. I'm thinking of the city I live in where they had an issue with parking. They had all the stats and the computers, and they knew that in 20 years or so, they were going to have major parking problems and they should build a city parking garage. But the same land for the parking garage could be sold to a chain restaurant, which would provide the city with mucho tax dollars. So they said, we're just going to kick that can down the road, get all the money from taxes from this restaurant. And as a result, we now have major parking problems. So that's a kind of a more removed way of looking at that. So yeah, I think that suffering and in Buddhism again, Buddhism was something that was invented for aesthetics, or not aesthetics, ascetics. Invented for people that were already kind of on the path. These were people who had been trying to, I don't know how you want to put it, gain enlightenment, awakening. Suffering is really the product of ignorance. So if we can awaken, we will stop doing the things that cause us to suffer. But when we're suffering and we see that we're causing our suffering, that in itself is growth. So I think there's also to be, I think you also need to make the distinction between, because I'm thinking about this now. I talk about skillful samsara. Samsara is the wandering around we do in householder life. We're householders. We live in the world. I got to pay bills. I got to keep gas in the car. I got to, do all the responsibilities, keep appointments and stuff like that. That like a monk or a renunciant, he's just living in the woods and going on his alms rounds, and he doesn't have to worry about all this stuff. So within that world, you want to be a good householder. You want to keep your precepts. It's late. You want to keep your precepts. For some reason, I was thinking of insects. For some reason, you want to keep like grasshoppers bobbing around. No. You want to keep your precepts. You don't kill. You don't take. You don't lie. You don't take what is not offered. You don't engage in sexual irregularities. You don't consume alcohol. These are your precepts, and these are designed, among other things. I mean, in part, they're a training of the mind. When you're keeping precepts, it really makes you pay attention to your mind, because it's like, well, I want to do this. Well, why? It gets you to really examine what's going on. But it also means that your society, your family, your friends, everything's going to function a lot better. So we can say within that householder life, yes, when you overcome adversity, when something happens that you don't like and you overcome it, yes, that is helping you grow and be a better householder and hopefully a more mature person within the framework of the larger path of Buddhism. So on that level, yes, suffering is helpful, but from a higher standard, it's more helpful because it shows you that you want to get out of suffering altogether and address the real root causes. The root cause of suffering isn't because you don't have this or you don't have that. The root cause of suffering is your own mind. And again, this is not pain. Pain is inescapable. The pain of aging, illness, and death. You're not going to get away from that. We're talking about mental anguish, the suffering that we create for ourselves. I mean, when you overcome physical suffering, physical pain, that's another kind of growth. It's teaching mental endurance and stamina and all that sort of thing. And overcoming mental suffering can also build you up, especially when it helps you. If the suffering gets bad enough, you really want to get it out at the root, and that's when you can really dig at the root of suffering. So yeah, I would say that both are true. Suffering does lead to growth, but suffering is also something that you want to avoid, and it's this avoidance that can lead us to growth. If it can also lead us the other way if we're not careful. That the other way was what I was saying before. When you suffer, and it's like, well, I'll just drink some more, I'll just smoke some more, I'll just do this, I'll just do some coke, whatever, blah, blah, blah. That's not the way to cope with suffering. But that's not what you're talking about, I don't think. You're talking about successfully overcoming something and still being a good person, sort of thing. So.
And you actually brought up another thing too, like when we were having the conversation just a second ago about us lying to ourselves, and I can understand where you're coming from too, like for being in that state of mind where our minds lie to us, and we start to suffer. There's always the easy way out. So why not just go back to the booze or the drugs, because it's the softer, easier way. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I can see. I understand that completely too, right there. I mean,
And that's why the mind does that. It wants you to go back there. It's very sneaky.
mm-hmm.
These other selves, they're very subtle, very sneaky. They'll set up a whole thing where this will happen and that'll happen, and and part of you knows this is going to happen, and it's going to put you in that position. And damn, I could use a drink.
Yep.
And why not? Like you're saying, it's the easier thing to do. You've done it a lot. There's the store. Everyone's doing it. Like, it's on TV. I just saw a movie where they're all drinking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it will lie. They will lie to you. Make you think all sorts of. Well, this person really, all these things can be subtle over days, just to get you to the point where you're driving past the liquor store and so you go, Remember I was talking about that before, where it's like, keeping precepts and why did I drive past the liquor store again? What part of me is deciding, well, take this road? So yeah, they can operate very subtly sometimes, and there's always a lie involved.
Yep. I do like how you brought that up. That was actually a pretty inept way of bringing it out, because that's something I didn't even catch either. Because I'm like, I've heard a lot of people who are into Buddhism say that, you know what I mean, through suffering you learn how to overcome, like a trial through fire kind of thing. But there's also a flip side to that, you know what I mean? Like, there are people who just think they have to go out and look for suffering, you know what I mean? They have to put themselves into a situation where they're suffering when they don't really have to.
Yeah, that's kind of almost the Jains. If you know about the Jain religion,
Mm-hmm.
they were around at the time of the Buddha, and they're still around. And they kind of have that idea where you should go out of your way to suffer, because that way you burn off bad karma or kama. And it's very, again, I don't think it's very skillful. And the Buddha is not about suffering. He's about you ending your suffering. As somebody said once, when the Buddha was teaching this, he didn't say, do you deserve to end your suffering? What did you do to have this karma? Ooh, you murdered what? You killed your dad? You did this? Oh, well, maybe you should, No, he never said that, because we're all in that boat, especially if you accept the idea of past lives. We've all been there. We've been here, according to the Buddhist ideas anyway, we have been here through this entire universe, and probably the universe before that, and the universe before that. Uncountable numbers of lives. He once said that if you took all the blood that you have shed as a killer, as a butcher or a soldier, killing chickens, whatever, that blood would be larger in extent than the sea. If you took all the blood that bled out of you as your throat was cut, either as a human or as an animal or as anything else, that would be larger than the sea. All the tears you have wept for children, parents, brothers, sisters, friends, strangers, again, more than the sea. So you don't want to do that anymore. You know, I'm tired of that. I want to get out. And Buddhism's sort of about just saying, you know, if life is likened to the Matrix or to a video game, the Buddha is the guy that says, you know what, game over. I don't want to play this anymore. I want to go see what else there is to do. And of course, there is the question of what else there is to do, but that's another story.
Yeah, I do want to do a shout out to Scott Morrison 1703 on YouTube. He made a comment in the comment section. He put M, and I think he did a heart. So I said thank you for stopping
excellent.
by. So,
Thanks very much, man. Good to hear from you. Ruby, we're creating an audience.
Eventually,
You're on the ground floor on Automatic Pilot. This is only our second show and only the first serious Buddhist one.
yeah.
Nice.
I think it's gotten pretty much in line though, because I mean I've had chances to talk to, you know what I mean, actually have conversations, and I think that the way you're doing it right now is this is you know what I mean, this is Otto. So don't,
I guess it is.
you know what I mean. So I mean that's the reason why I know personally I can tell everybody. I mean, everybody I've ever introduced you to loves you to death. You know what I mean, for a reason. You know, it's like I think V's fallen in love with you. Like,
oh well. Well, I'm a happily married man, so
yeah,
that's not
I know.
going to
I had to point that out to him. I was like, he's married. Leave him alone, V.
He's a good egg. I like V. He's a good man.
You know.
Yeah, we've been talking a little bit about Buddhism, chatting a little about that, and he's interested. It's always good to talk to people, and I like meeting people that like to think and like to talk, you know, and I think we've got a pretty good circle of people like that around us, Raj.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure of it.
Yeah.
No,
well, you managed to accumulate quite a few good ones yourself with your channel.
Well, I mean,
some of those guys are really out to lunch, though, dude.
Yeah, I know. That's
that Mark Edwardy guy. Where'd you find him?
Oh,
sure, he's
God.
not.
He's the one that got me started in wanting to do this stuff, and then like now he just doesn't want to stop. You know what I mean? It's just my goodness. It's like, oh,
slave
God.
driver. Wow.
Yeah. and he's over in England. You know how people over in England are. They like to micromanage everything. So he keeps me up on the time zones, and if I get things messed up, he straightens me out. So we've got that covered. If we ever need any help with time zones, we've got Mark Edworthy.
There you go. He seems very focused.
Yeah, he is.
Like a focused kind of guy. Yeah, a lot of coffee too.
Mm-hmm. Coffee and cigarettes.
Well, you know, every time I see him rolling those up, I think, oh, I want a pipe. That there we go. That's how the human mind works. We imitate.
Yep.
That's how commercials work. You know, you see the people, they're going to Burger King or whatever. I want to go to Burger King now. You might hate Burger King, but you just saw it on TV. So
yeah. As a matter of fact, you have brought up a good topic, a good thing that you brought into on one of your posts. You mentioned the Matrix.
Yeah.
That was I'm gonna try to see if I can pull it up. I went in there and wrote a bunch of crazy stuff, but I wanted to read this and get your take of it, because this one This is good. I mean, this is really good. It says you finally escaped the Matrix, only to discover a more matrixy
Yeah,
Matrix.
yeah. More matrixy makers. Yeah.
Okay. So do you think you can kind of give us a little bit of an explanation on that one? Because I kind of have an idea, but I'd like to hear you bring
Well,
it up.
no, it's just a beam, man. Um, but it's if it uses that illustration, which is a woodcut done by a guy by the name of Flammarion. Um, of It's generally called the spiritual pilgrim discovers a new world,
Mhm.
and a lot of people listening have probably seen it. And it's about a guy who has reached the edge of the sky, and he's looking underneath the edge of the sky out into the wider world, the wider universe, and it's all these like wheels and rainbows and thunderclouds, and it's like basically all the mechanism that runs the universe. So in this version, he's instead seeing something more like the Matrix. I think it's basically an update to the original idea of the woodcut, which showed that if you could get past uh, the doors of perception, let's say, if you could open the doors of perception, you would perceive things as they are infinite. If you could get past what we simply encounter and endure through our senses, if we could get past our senses, we would see eternity and everything and this and that. And that was, I think, the original idea of the woodcut. But in this version, it's saying that once you get past this illusion, you're very likely to find another illusion behind that. And I think that's often the way with people pursuing the so-called paths of spiritual awakening, because and this ties in with the arrow flying straight to hell. These techniques that are taught in Buddhism, and to be fair, in other traditional, like in yoga and other schools of attainment, these are techniques of how to control your own mind, how to release yourself from certain mental states, and if they're taught to you piecemeal or just bits of them, they can be used as a kind of mind control technique. Again, it's really an abuse, although sometimes I think it's simply that the people themselves teaching are ignorant. They just take bits and pieces of different things that work, get people to meditate this way or do this breath exercise or this kind of yoga exercise for so long, and feed them this or have them fast or give them this kind of drug, and they're going to have this effect, and then you tell them it's this. And the story that Marco Polo told of the old man of the mountain, Hassani Sabah, that our friend Satori D, hello Satori, if you ever listen to this, draws a lot from as imagery. And Hassani Sabah was the head of the Ismailian sect of Islam, colloquially known as the Assassins.
Yeah.
And they basically had a network of fortresses and exerted quite a bit of political influence in their day. They were finally wiped out by Hulagu Khan when the Mongols came through, and they just wiped out everything. But in Marco Polo's story, they were explaining how they got these people to be assassins. And these guys someone said Hassani Sabah made modern men of his contemporaries, and they did not like it. He invented the first sleeper agent, as they're known in espionage today. And a lot of people know this story, but if you were an assassin, you might be assigned, well, go to such and such country and get a job with the king. And that guy might go there, and he might be there for 20 years, 30 years. He might be the vizier, a top trusted guy. The king thinks you can't get a better. He's worked for me for 23 years. I can trust this guy. And then he gets a message, kill the king. And he does it. And he doesn't care if he's captured, if he's tortured. He's going to heaven because he is dying at the orders of his religious leader. The head of the sect was considered to be semi-divine. And but they couldn't figure out why they would do this. So Marco Polo came up with a story, and this was the story that was told, was that when Hassan recruited you to be an assassin, he would bring you to Alamut, which was this castle, stronghold. And behind the castle was a valley. The only way to get into the valley was through the castle. It was this hidden little valley. And what would happen is you would come there and you would be drugged, unconscious. And when you awoke, you'd be in the valley. And there would be fountains flowing with wine. There would be beautiful girls who would do anything you wanted. There would be all the food you wanted, including forbidden foods that you weren't allowed to eat. Bacon was available. You just had the most amazing time. And then you were drugged again. And you passed out, carried back into the castle. You woke up, and there was Hassan. And he said, I have the power to send you to paradise in this life. I have just sent you to paradise. If you die for me, you will return there on death. And thus, he got their loyalty. And you remember the very famous sequence that was reported, I forget which medieval traveler was traveling by Alamut and had stopped, and he called him Senex de Mons, which is Latin for Old Man of the Mountain. He was known as the Old Man of the Mountain. And they later used this in the Conan the Barbarian movie, but in the he was saying to Hassan, it's like, well, we have very brave soldiers, in France. He says, I'll show you bravery, I'll show you devotion. And he just gestured to somebody that was on top of a tower. One of his watchmen just made a gesture. The guy just threw himself off.
Yep.
Died. Said that's devotion. And of course, we remember that with Thulsa Doom.
Yep.
Steel is strong, but flesh is stronger. So now, according to the legend, this was because his devotees were drugged with hashish. Thus, assassins derives from the word hashish, and that this was the drug that he used to transport them to paradise. Now, I know a lot of potheads. I smoke a lot of hash myself. I've never really thought that I was in paradise. I don't think anyone can fool me. But dude, you got really strong shit here, man. But I'm not going to kill myself for you. There was something else going on there, if it even happened at all. Just this whole idea of using your ability to manipulate. When you learn how to manipulate your own mind, and I talked about this in that short little video I did about the arrow flying straight to hell. I think you might have seen it. When you learn how to manipulate your own mind, that means not only is it impossible for other people to manipulate your mind, but you know how to manipulate other people's mind.
Mm-hmm.
And we all are good at, I don't like to use the word manipulation because that's got like a connotation of there being some malice behind it. But we all, when we communicate, we affect each other's thoughts by not just our words, but the way we speak, our gestures, our body language. There's less of that on the internet. Hell, even our pheromones, our electromagnetic fields. Communication functions on many levels. And when you have this knowledge, you can affect people's minds more directly. And unfortunately, if you have this knowledge without the virtues, without the ethical training that should go with it, then you might be very likely to use these abilities for short-term things like exploiting people, controlling them, sending them off to die in wars. And the thing is, the people who learned these skills were learning them to free people from these activities. Mm-hmm. They never intended that someone would take a part of their teachings and use it as a mind control device. And, that's why all these old mystic traditions were always very secret. If someone comes to me and says, I want you to teach me, I'm going to say, let's think about that. You don't do it right away. You wait till you see someone is actually very serious about it. And when they learn the whole thing. They learn about the importance of virtue. They learn about the importance of quieting their own mind so that they're at peace before they learn these techniques. Because if your mind isn't at peace and you can do all this stuff, you can turn off your emotions. You can say, hey, I can go and I can burn down a village. I don't care because I'm here in the now, man. What a useful tool. Now I can burn down villages. That's a misuse. And it ultimately leads to bad craziness, man. I don't know what other phrase to use. So there's that.
I was reading a conversation that Mr. Robot was having with Tan the other day, and he mentioned to an extent like what you actually it was exactly what you were talking about being guided by somebody, and it's just not anybody, you know what I mean? It has to be somebody who specializes in spiritual practices that needs to be like your mentor, your guide, to be your, I call them accountability partners. when I was going to my 12-step program, we referred to them as sponsors. You know, you have somebody there that's, you know, things of that nature. And that was what I got from what you were just saying there, you know, about when you go through and you learn how to think right, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know.
New and better patterns of thought, better habits of thought, because
Mhm.
so much of it is just habit too.
And, when I first heard about it, it was like I said, it was in a 12-step program, and they said it in a weird way. They would say you have to learn how to accept the lie, because my reality was a lie in the first place at that moment.
Right.
You know, I was living a complete lie. I was
Yeah.
in full flight of reality, and everything that I thought was just crap, basically, was actually the way people should live. You know what I mean? So to me, I had to learn how to accept that lie so that I could actually pull myself out of the horrible life
Right.
that I was in. You know what I mean?
You had to recognize it for what it was
Mhm. And
and stop fooling yourself. Yeah, that's classic. That's exactly what I was talking about taking on that identity.
mhm.
You know, you took on the identity of, was like, I don't want to be one of these squares from Delaware, man. I don't want to be one of these straight guys. I want my, my cafe rum royale in the morning, followed by, go hit the bar or whatever, whatever your thing was. And yeah, no, that's kind of like what I was saying, how you're living in your head in this little headspace you've created. And
Mhm.
once you see that's a lie, you can look around you more clearly. It's not being filtered by those definitions you had. Like you were saying, saying you didn't want any part of that. That's just no way to live. Well, who was saying that? You
Right.
know? And you can't believe that person. But when that's gone, then you can just look at it and say, hey, it's kind of nice not waking up with a hangover or
Yeah.
getting into fights with people. This is actually pretty cool. And it's yeah, no, I think the 12-step program, I was never in a 12-step program myself, but a cousin of mine was in a 12-step. He was in AA and NA. He was a really, um, he was the pirate. Remember the thing about me being a pirate?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I was. I always said that very technically I was a pirate. And the fact is that he was a pirate
Mhm.
and I worked for him for a while. So that made me technically a pirate, although I never went to sea or did anything piratical. But he was a maniac and he was into very hard drugs. He was a drug dealer. He was a biker. He killed people. He did some jail time for he was at Attica, which is our maximum security prison here, for manslaughter at one time. And I know he killed some other people that they never found out about it. He's really, I mean, I got along great with him. He was, his family, and I loved him. He got along well with family, most of his family. Didn't get along with his dad, but outsiders, he was a scary guy. He was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia at one time. So, but he joined the 12-step program. It turned him around amazingly. And he actually became like a leading figure down in his town where he was, and he was running the meetings and stuff like that. It's a very effective way, and I think it's got a lot of really excellent. I think it's the 12-step program's done a lot of good, and I again and again I meet people that have come out of it and they are happy with it, and and I always think, hey, it's done. I saw it myself with my cousin. I
Mhm.
saw what he was and what he became, and he was really such a mellow, happy guy by the time he died. Still much better than the early days of rumbling with the Hell's Angels. He was in a pagan affiliate, if you know anything about the bikers,
Yeah.
and so they were always at war with the Angels. He was an alien. He was a member of the Bronx Aliens. And oh yeah, he was telling me stories about, like, they would sell heroin to people, and to step on it, they would put in, like, like cement dust. People were going to be shooting at it, just stuff like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, but I remember one thing, when I was staying with him for a while, he had a trimaran sailboat, and he called it the contrition. And he said that was something he learned, to have contrition and try to make up for what he'd done and try to repair things as much as he could. And he was a good egg.
When you guys talk about the middle path, that's something that really sticks out to me when it comes to the 12-step programs, because especially in AA, they have this this belief. They're like, you don't have to jump through hoops to have a direct connection to your higher power. It's like that they believe that everybody who works the 12 steps has a direct link to God, to the God of the God of their understanding. You know what I mean? And whenever I hear of the middle path that you guys talk about in Buddhism, that's what it always reminds me of. So I'm pretty sure they got that concept from Buddhism. I'm not quite sure, but I'm pretty sure they are. I'm still taking notes.
I wouldn't be surprised, but that's also an idea that is kind of in the air. Even though there's a Latin tag, in medio tutissimus bis, the middle way is safest, and moderation in all things. So I don't think the Buddha ever claimed to be original either, but and it's like I was saying before, a lot of the times people look at what he was saying, it's like, what's this? This is so simple, but it's not simple. As you know yourself, you've gone through the program, it's not easy taking that middle path.
Right.
Sometimes, you want to go to either extreme. We love to be extreme creatures. We either want to just booze it up day and night, or at the other end, just I'm only going to drink warm water, not talk to anyone, and just and punish myself for all the bad things. And I do like that idea that it leaves naming your higher power up to you. You don't have to say Jehovah or Allah or Jesus or whoever, or Odin or whatever, as long as you recognize that there's something you can reach for that will reach back.
Right.
I think you could even argue that you could even say it's your higher self. There's people that like to say that. Aleister Crowley used to talk about what he called the holy guardian angel, the knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel. And he once said that he called this experience that because he didn't think anyone was in danger of taking it seriously. That when you have this contact, you really can't put a name on it. And when you start calling it things, that can be good for your own personal understanding. But if other people pick it up, they say, oh, well, he was in contact with Odin or Thor, so that means Thor is correct. No, it would be just as correct if it was Jehovah. It would be just as correct if it was, whatever you want to call that higher part of yourself or the higher being. Words fail us there. Words fail us at certain experiences, but we can talk about the effects they have. We can say, hey, if you do this and you make this contact, things will go better for you. This will be a resource for you. You don't have to give it the name. Like you're saying, a middle way. You're not trying to either tell people there is no such thing, or not saying there is such a thing and it's this particular God. You're saying it's there. Reach for it and it'll reach back.
I think the most amazing part about that whole concept is, like, you would think that would be the easier path, like you were saying, but it actually puts you in conflict with everything else. Like, and that even goes with even religious concepts to a certain extent. You know what I mean? Because when you take that path, you're actually in conflict with other people's belief systems. Like they don't want to hear that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's really strange because, like, whenever I was drinking and doing drugs, I was in conflict with being a good person, basically. You know what I mean? I was fighting against the world, but then whenever I turn around and I decided to quit doing the drugs and the alcohol and try to do the next right thing, again I was in conflict with the rest of the world, but in a different way. You know what I mean? So it's really an eye opener for me. Like, and I think out of all of the religions, the ones that really has piqued my curiosity is the Buddhism, because of those concepts, because it's really interesting.
And when you're talking about not being specific about stuff, in Buddhism, very famously, whenever people would come to the Buddha with a question that we would consider to be religious, like, is the universe infinite? Does an arhat exist after death? What happens? He wouldn't talk about that. He wouldn't say yes or no. He would say, that's not something we're discussing here. We will put that aside because we're working on this. We're working on controlling our minds. We're working on ending suffering. We're working on, meditating. You don't have to worry about the name of God. You don't have to worry about how you're going to name all these experiences. You simply have to have them, kind of thing. So, that's why, sometimes you'll hear people say, well, Buddhism isn't really a religion. Well, it's certainly a religion, especially as regards to IRS tax exempt status. But it's asking questions and coping with problems that a lot of times we in the West don't consider to be religious questions so much. And it ignores a lot of stuff. It's like, come on, what's the name of God? It's like, we're not here to talk about that. Go talk to a priest, okay? We're here to get our minds working better and suffering to get out of this whole game. I know I've always felt that I personally don't see any contradictions between Buddhist ideas and most religions on their practical sides. That you can have certainly arguments about like theology, but I was talking to someone that's like, well, my family doesn't think much about Buddhism and and I was like, well, look, are they really going to be upset because a guy says, look, I am not going to kill, lie, steal, cheat, or drink? All right, is this really a bad? I can't see any Christian or Muslim or Jew really objecting to someone saying, I'm not going to do those 5 things anymore. So. On that moral level and that practical day-to-day level, I think I don't see any contradiction really between most religions. Most religions on a social level are designed so that the society will function better. As a friend of mine said, if everybody kept precepts, you wouldn't need police. What would you need police for? No one's killing, stealing, cheating, murdering, or even getting drunk. You don't even have any drunk drivers on the road. So yeah, it's kind of interesting, but the minute you start naming things, though, you start limiting things. I mean, that's got its own power too, I guess. But the ancient Egyptians thought if you knew the name of a god, you could compel the god.
Yeah,
you could make it do what you wanted. I know your secret name, Ra. You better do this or else. I'm going to tell everybody.
I actually that naturally happened to me though, because like my cat, I was telling everybody I don't know why I decided to do it, but I never named him.
Huh.
Just cat. Just the cat. And
that's a good name. Cat is good.
I started coming to that conclusion. It was like, why would I mean, who gives me the right to actually name it other than a religious text that says that humans named all the animals on Earth? You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, I'm sure that Adam and Eve sat around naming every single creature. You know what I mean? I mean, it just I just there's some things that I don't feed into.
You should read Mark Twain wrote something called Extracts from Adam's Diary.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever read that? Very short little piece. It's Adam's diary, in the Garden of Eden.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, saw like, I forget the details, like, saw a capybara today. Didn't know it was called that, but the woman seemed to think it should be called things. She's going around naming everything. I don't see why things need names, but this woman seems to think everything needs to be named. There's little Eve going around. I was like, well, that's a cat. That's a dog. Like, why? It's just a woofer thing. Okay, we'll call it a dog. It's funny. I was thinking too about what you were saying earlier about how when you change what you do in life, you go against the grain. It's like you're going against everyone. And I'm reminded of something I was reading. I think it was there was a famous Buddhist Ajahn. I think it was Ajahn Chah, who was criticized. He was a guy that was trying to live very Buddhist, and he would go against a lot of the local Thai traditions. The Thai traditions, well, we do this and we eat this way, and he's like, no, we're doing it this. And they would say to him, you're going against these Thai traditions. And he says, I'm not interested in these traditions. I'm interested in the traditions of the noble one. People who are in the Buddhist Sangha, you have the Sangha, which are the monks and nuns, and then you have the noble Sangha. And the noble Sangha are those monks who have realized enlightenment. They're Arhat monk, or at least they're stream enterers, which means that they're bound for release. And it's called the noble path, the truth of the Eightfold Noble Truth. And the word literally is Arya, which means noble. And one of the interesting things about Buddhism was that it kicked over the caste system that existed in India, which was this way of like ethnic and racial separation that they had. And, you couldn't eat with certain groups, or, certainly you couldn't intermarry with them. And the Buddha was of the Kshatriya, the warrior, noble warrior caste, the Arya. And he said, when you join my Sangha, you are part of my family. You are of the noble Arya caste. In other words, no matter what your caste was before, now you are on the path of the noble ones. And you yourself are on a noble path and are becoming noble yourself, and you are part of the noble family. So, and it takes me back to something from the Platform Sutra, which is a late Mahayana thing, but it's still a very good quote, where this guy came up to study with the Zen patriarch, and he was from the south of China, and this guy was from the north. And the Southerners had a bad reputation. They were hunters. They had blood on their hands. They didn't live very nicely. They were ignorant. Sort of like some of the prejudices you even see today in Italy for Southern Italians, or even in the United States for Southern Americans. And so he comes to the Zen master, says, I'm from the South, I want to study. And the master, oh, somebody from the South. And he replies, some people are from the North and some people are from the South, but there is no North and there is no South in the Buddha mind. And that's when the patriarch said, yes, good answer, you're my pupil. He hit him up with that prejudice thing. Is that going to affect your mind? Is that going to rock your boat? But his mind is past that, letting that in. And instead, he just answers very calmly, and he passed a little test when that happened. But it's still a very valid point. When it comes to Buddhism, all that matters is that you have a human body and a human mind. Doesn't matter how smart or dumb that mind is. It doesn't matter what shape, age, or color that body is, who your ancestors were. You've got the tools you need to be a noble one. I kind of like that.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Man.
Quite a talk tonight.
Yeah, it really was. I enjoyed this. This is pretty good.
Yeah. Well, it is getting late, though. We should think about wrapping it up. We didn't have much turbulence, but I think I see the lights of the Shambhala International Airport in the distance there. We're going to have to make a landing approach here pretty soon.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Well, then I guess I should thank everyone that has been listening. You said, Roger, we had some people who tuned in tonight?
Yes, we've had 30 views on YouTube so far. Now, after the stream's done, most likely that'll go up quite a bit. We usually get more after the stream comes in. On Rumble, there are 3 people right now that are watching, and we got a comment from Scott Morrison 1703 on YouTube.
Excellent.
We had two views on Kick, and so far we've had 3 views on Twitch. So
well, Rumble seems to be where it's at, but hello to everyone everywhere watching and or listening to us, no matter what platform you're using or where you are. Thanks very much for tuning in, and if anyone wants to leave a little comment, let us know where you are. It'd be kind of cool to know how far our reach is, and even what time it is there, because we don't have Mark Edworthy with us to handle the time zones right now. So, no, it's been really wonderful talking with you tonight, Roger. You make an excellent co-pilot. I think we have a better show when there are fewer people on sometimes.
yeah, I agree. It's
Yeah, we need to be really focused with this, and I think that'll help. But that doesn't mean we're not going to have guests in the future. I hope we have many interesting guests, and we'll force them all to talk strict Buddhism, right? Me.
oh God.
Uh, he's a good egg. I like it. He's a good man. Uh,
I,
well, I'm going to switch off our automatic pilot here in a minute. Did you have anything you wanted to throw into the mix, Raj?
thanks for allowing me to be here, and that's about it.
Oh, got to have the co-pilot and, of course, the electronics warfare officer. Very important job.
Yep.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the seatbelt light is coming on, and unfortunately, the no smoking light has come on. Hope you've been smoking them if you have them, but we are approaching Shambhala International Airport. A large portal is opening in the side of a Himalayan mountain, which I cannot reveal the name of because, of course, the location of Shambhala is a closely guarded secret. But I see the entrance door opening. The beacon is lit, so I'm switching off automatic pilot, taking control, and we'll be landing soon. Thanks very much for flying with us tonight. Looking forward to having you with us next week. Thanks again, everyone. And happy birthday, Bob Dub, wherever you are.
Happy birthday, Bob Dub.